They cut me out of the merger at 2:47 p.m., so I sold their future to a nobody the first time I saw the word obsolete. Next to my name, it was 2:47 p.m. on a Thursday. Not in an email, not in some official HR document. It was in a slide deck buried on page 32 of a presentation I wasn't supposed to see. Key role redundancies, post-merger alignment. Underneath, in a neat bullet point, Ethan Cole, Director Strategic Operations, Obsolete, Post-Integration, Knowledge Transition, 30 days, Severance, Tier C. For a second, I thought I was looking at someone else's life, some other Ethan, some other 8 years. Then I recognized the ID number under my name, same one printed on the badge hanging around my neck, the badge that still unlocked every door in that building. For now. 1. The atrium. That morning started with applause. Fake, brittle applause, the kind that never reaches anyone's eyes. We were packed into the glass atrium on the 15th floor of Apex Meridian, a software company that liked to call itself the nervous system of American healthcare. I'd written that line once for a pitch deck. Now it hung on a 12-foot banner above our heads. Apex Meridian plus Helix Dynamics, a new era of connected care. There was a stage, lights, a rented LED screen, even a fog machine that someone thought would make the merger announcement more cinematic. All it did was make the room smell like burned plastic. I checked my watch. 9:02 a.m. The CEO of Apex, Victor Lang, stood in the middle of the stage in his navy suit and perfect hair, smile polished to a corporate shine. Beside him, Helix Dynamics CEO. A woman named Regina Hayes raised their joined hands like they'd just finished a boxing match. "Today," Victor said, his voice echoing off glass, "we are not just merging companies, we are aligning missions. Together we will become the de facto operating system for every hospital, every clinic, every care provider in America." More applause, more fog, more buzzwords. I stood near the back, shoulder against the cool glass, holding a paper cup of coffee that had already gone lukewarm. "Hey, Ethan," someone whispered next to me. It was Mia Torres from compliance, her dark hair pulled into a tight bun, expression unreadable. "You look thrilled. Ecstatic," I said. "I live for synergy." She snorted softly. "You see the email invite. No Q&A after. Just celebrate and enjoy breakfast." Translation: no awkward questions about layoffs on camera. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw the calendar notification. 2:30 p.m. 1.1 with HR, Conf-Rem 11E, mandatory, of course. Victor kept talking about runways and market dominance and transformational opportunities. The words washed over me like elevator music. I wasn't thinking about mission. I was thinking about the thing that had quietly made Apex valuable enough to attract a company like Helix Dynamics in the first place, a thing I had architected. Atlas. 2. Atlas. On paper, Atlas was a flexible integration layer that unified disparate hospital information systems into a single actionable workspace. In reality, Atlas was duct tape and miracles. Hospitals ran on a Frankenstein of software, ancient billing systems written in cobwebbed languages, lab tools that only exported CSVs, radiology platforms that spoke in proprietary protocols, and EMRs that pretended to be standards compliant until you actually tried to use them. Atlas sat in the middle of that chaos and quietly made it look like everything was under control. I'd spent 6 years building it. Nights, weekends, holidays. Not because anyone asked me to, but because I couldn't stand watching nurses open 7 different windows just to find out whether a patient had been billed for a test that a doctor ordered 2 hours ago. Atlas started as a side project. A script here, a connector there, then a demo, then a pilot, then 1 hospital, then 5, then 18. It became the spine of our product. Helix Dynamics didn't want Apex Meridian because of our brand or Victor's vision. They wanted the thing that nobody outside a few dozen people really understood. The ugly, beautiful Atlas engine humming in the background, holding the whole mess together. And I was the one who knew every compromise in its code, every brittle handshake, every hidden kill switch. But in the atrium that morning, when Victor said, "We owe this moment to the tireless work of our leadership team," he didn't say my name. He said Jenna's, especially Jenna Park, our VP of Product Integration, who led the Atlas program to new heights. The applause got louder. The spotlight found her near the front, a woman in her early 30s, sharp jawline, sharper eyes, shoulders pulled back like she'd swallowed the word deserved whole. 3 years ago, she'd been my most promising hire. I'd taught her how to read log files like confessionals. She'd come to my office late at night with questions about how to handle race conditions in an ICU scheduling module, or what idempotency really meant when the system underneath didn't believe in second chances. Now she was Victor's golden child. I watched her look up at him with that small, calculated smile. Not grateful, not surprised, prepared. My stomach settled into a quiet, cold certainty. Whatever this merger meant, it wasn't going to mean good things for people like me. People who built things in the dark and didn't smile enough on stage. 3. The meeting. At 2:28 p.m., I stood outside conference room 11E, with my hand on the door handle, listening. I heard the low murmur of voices, the rustle of papers, the soft clack of a keyboard. I'd been in enough mandatory HR meetings to know the choreography. There would be a glass of water on the table, untouched, a folder with my name on it, maybe a box of tissues in the corner, just in case. I didn't intend to cry. I opened the door. Inside, the room was exactly as expected. Frosted glass walls, a thin rectangular table, 3 chairs, 2 of them occupied. Clara Voss, our HR director, sat at one end with a laptop open in front of her, her face fixed in a practiced half-frown of concern. Next to her sat a man in a gray suit I'd never seen before. "Ethan," Clara said, standing, voice soft. "Thanks for coming. This is Daniel Ward from Helix Dynamics. He's part of the Integration Task Force." "Task Force," I repeated, taking my seat. "That sounds important." Daniel gave a tight, efficient smile. He had the look of a man who ironed his socks. "We understand this is a difficult time," Clara began. "There are a lot of changes happening quickly and—" "Just say it," I said. I didn't raise my voice. I just wanted to skip the theater. "Am I being laid off?" Clara's left eye twitched almost imperceptibly. She clicked something on her laptop. The man in gray glanced at the screen and then folded his hands. "Your current role," Daniel said, "will not exist in the new organizational structure." There it was, clean, clinical, the sentence equivalent of a scalpel. "However," Clara added quickly, "we want to honor your contributions over the years. You're being offered a 30-day transition period to assist Jenna in handing over key Atlas knowledge, after which you'll receive a severance package." "Tier C," I said. Clara blinked. "I'm sorry. In the deck," I said. "Slide 32. Key role redundancies." I saw it. A flicker of annoyance passed over Daniel's face, gone in a blink. Clara pressed her lips together. "You weren't on the distribution list for that draft," she said quietly. "Yeah," I said. "I noticed." Silence settled over the table like dust. "Ethan," Daniel said, lacing his fingers on the table, "Apex Meridian and Helix Dynamics both value what you've done. But post-integration, many functions are being consolidated. Strategic operations under the Apex model overlap significantly with our existing teams. The Atlas engine will be productized under a unified Helix platform. That work will be led by Jenna." "Of course it will," I murmured. "You'll have the opportunity," Clara said, to train the team, document anything that isn't formalized yet, and ensure a smooth knowledge transition. I looked at her. You want a brain dump? We want to make sure your work lives on, she said, in the new organization. I thought about all the times I'd warned Victor and the board about our revenue recognition practices around Atlas installations. How sales had pushed us into structuring implementation fees that looked a lot like disguised licenses, how support contracts blurred lines with new feature development, the way we'd started booking projected usage before hospitals had fully gone live. I thought about how those warnings had been received, like static. What if I say no? I asked. Clara's fingers tightened on her pen. Daniel's gaze didn't flinch. You signed a confidentiality and invention assignment agreement when you joined Apex, he said. You're obligated to provide reasonable assistance in transitioning your responsibilities. Failure to do so could impact your severance eligibility. So I cooperate, I said slowly. And I get, what, 2 months' pay? 8 weeks, Clara said, plus 3 months of Cobra coverage. I nodded. Then I smiled. It was a small, thin thing. It felt unfamiliar on my face. Okay, I said. I'll cooperate. Clara exhaled. That's good to hear, Ethan. That's really. I'll give you everything you've earned, I added. Neither of them caught the choice of verb. Not yet. 4. The folder. They slid the folder across the table after the legal disclaimers, like a condolence card. Inside was the usual severance summary, reemployment assistance brochure, a list of next steps. There was also a printed org chart of the future state structure. I unfolded it. Boxes and lines, names and titles. At the top, Regina Hayes, CEO, Helix Dynamics. Below her, Victor Lang, President, Provider Solutions. So he'd gotten his prize, a title instead of a company. Further down, Product Integration, VP, Jenna Park, Atlas Integration Lead, Open, Implementation Strategy, Open, Hospital Client Liaison, Open, no Director of Strategic Operations, no Ethan Cole. You can take some time to process this, Clara said. We don't expect you to make any immediate decisions. Your last official day will be. My eyes slid to a small notation at the bottom of the chart. A box with dotted lines that wasn't quite connected to anything else. Orion Initiative, Stealth Program, report to R. Hayes. No names, no roles, just a code name, Orion. I'd seen that word once before, in a commit message buried deep in the Atlas repository. A comment tagged by Jenna 3 months ago. Jot temp hack for Orion pilot. Clean this before go. I'd asked her about it in passing. She'd shrugged, said it was just some internal refactoring stuff for performance testing. I believed her, back then. Now looking at that dotted box, something settled into place. Orion wasn't performance testing. Orion was a second spine being grown quietly behind the curtain. A fork of Atlas, maybe. A reimagining. Something they could claim was built under Helix Dynamics, not Apex Meridian. Not by me. Quick question, I said, tapping the page. What's Orion? Daniel's expression didn't change, but he blinked once. That's not relevant to your transition. So I should assume, I said, still looking at the chart, that everything I built for Atlas is going into this Orion, and that Helix gets to pretend they grew it in-house. Ethan, Clara said softly, I know this is emotional, but... Is any of this emotional? I asked, folding the chart back up. Feels pretty surgical to me. I slid the papers back into the folder and closed it. Just so we're clear, I added. You're not firing me for performance. No, Clara said quickly. You've consistently met and exceeded expectations. This is purely structural, Daniel said. A business decision. Good, I thought. It would matter later that they'd said that, out loud. 5. The desk, back at my desk. The afternoon light slanting through the windows turned every dust mote into a little floating deadline. People moved carefully around me, eyes skittering away. News traveled fast in offices like this. Someone always knew someone who knew a custodian who'd been told to bring up extra cardboard boxes. I opened my laptop. Technically, they could have locked me out of everything the second I left the conference room. Sometimes companies did that. IT lurking in the background, fingers hovering over the disable button while HR delivered the script. Helix hadn't done that. That told me something. They still needed me. At least a little. I checked my access. Email, still active. Slack, still buzzing. Internal dashboard, still live. Atlas admin console, still there. Root access, still mine. I could have done a lot of damage in that moment. Pulled logs, wiped configs, injected chaos. I didn't. I was angry, but not stupid. Anyone can swing a hammer. Not everyone can move a load-bearing wall an inch and make the whole house list slowly over 6 months. I started with something simpler. I opened my password manager and exported a personal copy of my non-privileged notes. Architecture diagrams I'd sketched in Markdown, implementation retrospective summaries, anonymized performance reports. Nothing that violated my NDA, nothing that contained client secrets or proprietary code. Just the story of what we'd done, the problems we'd solved, the way we'd solved them, the kind of story nobody ever bothered to write down until they had to sell it. While the progress bar crawled across the screen, a Slack message popped up from Jenna. Jenna, can we talk? Today, if possible. Transition. Of course. I stared at the blinking cursor in the reply box. Ethan. 4:30. Atlas War Room. The Atlas War Room wasn't really a war room. Just a side conference room on the 10th floor we'd commandeered during a brutal 6-month implementation in Chicago. The name stuck because the walls were still stained with diagrams and post-its and fragments of conversations nobody fully remembered. It seemed like the right place to have our conversation, where everything had started to look like a battle. 6. The War Room. At 4:28 p.m., I stood in the war room, uncapped marker in hand, staring at a whiteboard that still had a half-erased note from 2 years ago. Assume the nurse is tired. I'd written that in a moment of frustration when a junior dev kept blaming user error for a sequence of misclicks that had almost caused a patient to be double-medicated. Design like everyone's exhausted, I'd told them. Because they are. The door opened behind me. Hey, Jenna said. I turned. She looked exactly as she had in the atrium. Composed, efficient. But there was a tightness at the corners of her eyes I hadn't seen before. Hi, I said. Congratulations on your promotion. She flinched, just barely. Ethan, it's okay, I said. Victor always did like people who look good on slides. She set a folder down on the table, identical to mine. I found out about your role change yesterday. Role change, I repeated. Nice phrasing. I'm serious, she said. I didn't know they were going to cut your position. I assumed they'd move you to some kind of principal architect role under Helix. Why would they? I said. I'm not cheap, I'm not shiny. And I tend to say things like, "This is fraudulent," in meetings. She looked at the whiteboard instead of at me. They value the work you've done, but not the person who did it, I said. Got it. Silence. She took a breath. Helix wants to rebuild Atlas as part of a broader data platform. That's what Orion is. It's not just a fork of your code. It's a different way of thinking about the problem. Different how? I asked. More predictive, she said. Less reactive, using hospital data to forecast capacity, resource utilization, even patient outcomes. So you're building an engine, I said slowly. That takes in all the data that Atlas currently integrates, and then sells predictions on top of it. It will help hospitals make better decisions, she said, and it will help Helix sell a second product on top of the first, I added, with the same data. She didn't deny it. You could have told me, I said, when you tagged that commit, when you said it was just performance testing. I was under NDA, she said. Directly with Helix. Victor wanted to keep the initiative off Apex systems until the deal was further along. So you moved Atlas into a shadow repo, I said, and started building Orion on top. Not exactly, she said. We've been using scrubbed data sets, synthetic loads. Nothing you built has been copied over verbatim. Legally scrubbed, I said. Morally gray. She finally met my eyes. I tried to get you into the room, she said, for Orion. Victor said no. He didn't want two centers of gravity. He wanted a single narrative. Visionary young VP builds transformative platform with Helix. Of course he did, I said. The story sells better without the middle-aged guy who actually wrote the map. Her jaw tightened. You're 40. In tech years, that's fossilized. I put the marker down. What do you need from me? I asked. She opened her folder. We have 30 days to make sure everything you know about Atlas is captured. Edge cases, manual overrides, undocumented fail-safes. Helix wants a clean transition. After that I evaporate, I said. After that, she said more quietly, you're free to do whatever you want. That was supposed to sound hopeful. Instead, it sounded like someone telling me I'd be free to walk away after my house finished burning down. 7. The quiet warnings. That night, in my apartment, I sat at my kitchen table, the severance folder open next to my laptop, and reread the documents. NDAs, non-disparagement clauses, intellectual property assignments. The language was broad, intentionally vague. I couldn't take code. I couldn't take confidential client information. I couldn't reveal trade secrets, proprietary methodologies, pricing structures. But there were things that didn't live in any of those categories. Observations, patterns, truth. I opened an encrypted notebook I kept for myself. Not on the Apex network, not in any cloud shared with the company. Local only, double encrypted. Backed up to an external drive that never left my apartment. I started listing everything I'd noticed in the last 2 years that had bothered me. Not about Atlas, about Apex. Instances where sales had booked revenue before installs were complete. Side letters, promising features that didn't exist yet. Implementation discounts that magically disappeared in quarterly reports. Hospitals pressured to sign off on acceptance testing before all modules were functioning. Internal emails where finance asked product to delay bug fixes until after a quarter closed so they could classify certain items as maintenance. At the time, each thing had looked like a small compromise. Taken together, they looked like a pattern. I'd raised concerns about some of it, quietly, in one-on-one conversations with Victor. In emails that always seemed to get lost under threads about top-line growth. In compliance meetings where Mia's notes grew longer and more frustrated. Now, with a merger in motion, those compromises weren't just bad habits, they were liabilities. I thought about Helix's due diligence. Either they knew and they were fine with it, or they didn't know and one day they'd wake up holding a bag full of ticking quarterlies. Either way, there was someone else who was supposed to care. I pulled up the SEC's whistleblower site in a separate window. I didn't fill anything out. Not yet. Revenge movies like to show one big dramatic move, one leak, one moment that changes everything. Real life doesn't work like that. You don't topple empires with a single email. You do it with gravity. You find the cracks in the foundation and start pulling away. Pebble by pebble, until one day the weight of their own decisions is finally enough. To an outsider, it looks like the building just collapses. To you, it looks exactly like what it is. I closed my laptop. Tomorrow, I would start cooperating. On the surface. Underneath, I'd start something else. 8. The offer. The something else came from a direction I didn't expect. 3 days into my transition period, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize while I was in the elevator on the way down to the smoking area behind the building, a place where people went to gossip more than to smoke. "Cole," I answered. "Ethan, it's been a long time." The voice was warm, slightly amused, with a hint of Texas under the vowels. "Cal?" I asked. "Still sharp," he said. "Most people forget me as soon as the contract's signed." I hadn't forgotten him. 3 years ago, when we first rolled out Atlas to a cluster of regional hospitals in the Midwest, Cal Donovan had been the CIO of one of them, St. Mary's Regional. Gruff, skeptical, allergic to buzzwords. He'd grilled us harder than any other client, poked holes in the architecture, demanded visibility into every failure mode. I'd liked him immediately. 2 years later, he'd retired, or so I'd heard. "What are you doing calling me on a Tuesday?" I asked. "I was having coffee," he said. "Saw the news about Apex and Helix, big splash, happy faces, synergy confetti." "Corporate mating rituals," I said. "Very romantic." "I also heard," he added, his tone shifting, "that some people are being made redundant." News traveled fast through hospital IT circles, too. "Word travels," I said. "Yeah, I'm one of them." "Damn shame," he said. "You're the only reason I didn't throw that whole project in the river." "Helix will build something bigger," I said. "Shinier, with more AI." "I don't trust shiny," he said. "I trust what works at 2:30 in the morning when the ER is full and the network's acting like it's drunk." Silence hummed between us. "Listen," he said. "I'm doing some advisory work now. Small outfit named Northline Systems. You heard of them?" The name was familiar, like something I'd scrolled past in a competitive analysis slide. "Tiny player," I said. "They do inventory and asset tracking for mid-size hospitals. Nothing like what Helix is building." "Yet," he said. I waited. "They've got good people," he continued. "Smart, scrappy, no delusions about ruling the world. They want to build tools that don't get in the way." They asked me who actually understood hospital plumbing. He paused. "I gave them your name." "I have a job," I said automatically. "For 27 more days," he said gently. "After that, you'll have a non-compete and a severance check and a lot of free time to wonder how the hell this all happened." "I can't take anything from Apex," I said. "No code, no proprietary designs, no client lists." "Didn't ask you to," he said. "I'm not talking about theft. I'm talking about perspective. They want to know how to build something that doesn't make the same mistakes as the big guys. Thought you'd have opinions." That was an understatement. "How small is small?" I asked. 6 engineers, one UX designer, a part-time sales guy, and a founder who still writes code at 2 in the morning, he said. "They're hungry. They've got funding for 18 months and a runway that looks like a roller coaster. They pay in cash and equity. More equity than cash." "Sounds like a gamble," I said. "So is staying loyal to people who just erased your job," he said. He had a point. "Just talk to them," he added. "No commitments, no lines crossed. You can do it on your own time. If you decide it's a bad idea, no harm done." The elevator doors slid open onto the lobby. People flowed around me, in and out, badge readers blinking green. "Okay," I said. "Set it up." "Attaboy," he said. "I'll send you a Zoom link." He hung up. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and walked out into the air, feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not hope. Not yet. Options. 9. 30 days. The next 3 weeks were a kind of double life. By day, I was the model outgoing employee. I sat in conference rooms with Jenna and a rotating cast of engineers and product managers, drawing diagrams on whiteboards, explaining how Atlas handled failover when radiology went offline, or how we'd hacked around a billing system that couldn't handle leap years. I answered questions, I wrote documentation, I even recorded screen share videos, walking through complex workflows. On the surface, I looked cooperative, professional, resigned. Helix loved me. By night, I sat in my apartment talking to Northline Systems over glitchy video calls. Their founder, a woman named Priya Rao, was the opposite of Victor. No suit, no stage voice, just tired eyes, quick mind, and a notebook full of messy sketches. "We don't want to be another Helix," she told me in our first call. "We don't want to own the entire stack. We want to be the piece that never breaks when everything else does." "You're thinking smaller," I said. "I'm thinking sharper," she replied. "Hospitals don't need more platforms. They need tools that respect that they already have 7. I told her what I could, carefully, about the kinds of problems Atlas had solved and the ones it hadn't. About the way nurses used the system when nobody was watching, about the shortcuts they took, the hacks they invented on the fly. I didn't share Apex's code. I didn't share confidential configs. I didn't even share screenshots. I shared something much more dangerous: reality. Priya listened, took notes, asked questions nobody at Helix had asked in any of the integration meetings. What happens when the hospital's Wi-Fi dies in the middle of a code blue? How many clicks does it take for a nurse to see the last 3 meds administered? What's the fastest way to break everything? When I hung up from those calls, my brain was buzzing in a way it hadn't in years. Not from fear, from possibility. During the days, Jenna was building Orion, a predictive engine on top of Atlas's spine. At night, with Northline, I was sketching something else. Not a rival to Atlas, a parasite. A layer that could attach itself to any hospital's existing systems, Helix included, and quietly give people what they actually needed, without asking them to swear allegiance to a new empire. A shadow nerve. "You're describing an overlay," Priya said one night. "A thin client that sits above all the major EMRs and systems, listens quietly, and gives clinicians a unified, task-based interface without replacing anything." "Exactly," I said. "No rip and replace, no promises to solve everything. Just less friction where it matters most." "We'd need connectors to all the usual suspects," she said. "Epic, Cerner, Meditech. You don't have to say their names out loud," I said. "The lights might flicker," she smiled. "We'd also need a licensing model that doesn't make CFOs suspicious." "You mean one that doesn't require them to bet their careers on one vendor," I said. "Yeah," she said. "That." We called it Ghost Line, as a joke. A whisper on the edges of the system. The name stuck. By the time my last week at Apex rolled around, we had the skeleton of something real. A product that didn't exist yet. For a market that didn't know it needed it. I was still an employee of Apex Meridian. I was also unofficially the first architect of their future problem. 10. The last day, on my last day in the building. There were no speeches, no farewell cake, no awkward card passed around with generic best of luck messages. People in my position didn't get parties. They got boxes. I packed my few physical belongings. A coffee mug with a chip in the rim, a stack of notebooks filled with sketches, a small framed photo from a team off-site years ago. At 4:55 p.m., I walked my box to the elevator. My badge still worked when I tapped it. Mia appeared beside me out of nowhere like she'd stepped out of a shadow. "You were going to leave without saying goodbye," she said. "I figured compliance had me on a watch list," I said. "Didn't want to trigger any alarms." She rolled her eyes. "You always triggered alarms." We stood in silence while the elevator descended. "You going to be okay?" she asked. "I've got a plan," I said. You always do, she said. Can't wait to subpoena it in 6 months. I glanced at her. You think it's going to get that bad? I think, she said, that Helix is buying numbers that don't entirely belong to reality, and reality always collects. Eventually. Have you documented everything? I asked quietly. She nodded. As much as I can without being escorted out. My job is to write down the things people pretend they didn't say. The elevator doors opened into the lobby. We stepped out. You could do more than write it down, I said. You know that. She met my eyes. There were things there we weren't allowed to say in a lobby with cameras. I have a mortgage, she said. 2 kids. Health insurance that would evaporate if I choose the wrong moment to grow a conscience. I'm not asking you to jump, I said. I'm just saying, if you ever need a place to land. Call you? She asked, one eyebrow arched. Or, someone I know, I said. She smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. Take care of yourself, Cole, she said. Try not to bring down the entire healthcare IT ecosystem on your way out. No promises, I said. Outside, the air smelled like impending rain. I walked to my car, put the box in the trunk, and looked up at the Apex building one last time. 15 floors of glass. Behind one of those panels, a conference room where Victor and Regina were probably practicing new ways to say transformational without laughing. Obsolete, I muttered. I got in the car and drove away. 11. The quiet filing. The SEC whistleblower portal is unimaginably boring. No dramatic graphics, no flashing warnings, just fields, boxes to fill, upload buttons. I sat at my kitchen table that night, the apartment lit only by the laptop screen and the glow from the city outside, and began to type. Dates, names, figures. I uploaded the documentation I'd collected over the years. Sanitized, annotated, cross-referenced. Emails where concerns had been dismissed. Reports where numbers were massaged. I was careful. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't speculate beyond what I knew. I stuck to what could be defended under oath. At the bottom of the form, there was a checkbox. Do you wish to remain anonymous, even to the company? I hovered over it. If I checked it, the SEC could still know who I was, but Apex and Helix wouldn't. I would become a ghost in their story, a rumor. If I left it unchecked, one day someone might read my name in a board packet. I checked the box, not out of fear, out of strategy. There are only 2 things corporations fear, more than regulators. One is a competitor, the other is a threat they can't see. I hit submit. A generic confirmation message appeared, promising that my information would be reviewed, that I might be contacted, that no one could promise outcomes. I didn't care about outcomes. I cared about weight. Another stone added to the slope. No. 12. Ghost line. The next 6 months were not dramatic. There were no raids, no headlines, no perp walks. From the outside, Helix Dynamics' acquisition of Apex Meridian looked like a success story. Regina and Victor appeared together on CNBC. They talked about integration milestones, revenue synergies, positive feedback from key hospital clients. The stock price climbed. Inside that story, in a part of the market nobody was watching yet, Ghost Line took shape. North Line Systems wasn't glamorous. Their office was a converted industrial space on the edge of a city you only knew if you'd driven through it by accident. Their desks were second-hand. Their coffee machine whined like it was pleading for retirement. But the code they wrote was clean. We started with a single hospital, not one of the big Apex clients, not on anyone's sales radar. A mid-sized community hospital that had been burned by every major vendor at least twice. They were wary. Skeptical, desperate. We can't afford another failed platform, their COO told us in the initial meeting. Our staff is exhausted. Our patients are numbers to everyone but us. If you tell me you're going to transform our digital journey, I will throw this chair." Priya smiled. "We're not here to transform you," she said. "We're here to get out of your way." We installed Ghostline quietly, not as a replacement to their existing systems, as a skin, one overlay interface in the ED, one for the ICU, one for MedSurg, each tuned to the specific workflow of that unit. Each designed around a single question: what does the tired human in front of this screen actually need in the next 10 seconds? Ghostline pulled data from their existing systems through legally obtained APIs and exported reports. It didn't dig into proprietary guts. It didn't violate licenses. It just listened. We watched nurses use it. The first night in the ED, a nurse named Sandra clicked through a patient handoff using Ghostline's new timeline view. No need to open 4 different apps. No need to memorize which tab held the last lab result. She exhaled. "Feels like someone finally admitted we exist," she muttered. We made note of that. Word spread, as it always does, not through press releases, but through text messages between people who remembered when tools didn't help. Within 3 months, we had 3 more hospitals. Within 6, we had 9. Tiny numbers in Helix's universe, significant in ours. Ghostline's architecture was intentionally agnostic. It could sit on top of a Helix Apex stack just as easily as a competitor's. That was the point. We weren't fighting them head-on. We were wrapping around them. 13. The crack appeared on a Tuesday afternoon in the form of a Bloomberg headline. SEC confirms inquiry into revenue recognition practices at Helix Dynamics Healthcare Division. I saw it because Priya forwarded it in Slack with a single message. The article was cautious. Phrases like "informal inquiry" and "no findings of wrongdoing" peppered the paragraphs. A Helix spokesperson was quoted saying they were fully cooperating and confident in their accounting practices. It didn't mention Apex Meridian by name, but it didn't need to. The healthcare division had only existed since the merger. "Think that's you?" Priya asked on our call that night. "I think I'm a minor supporting character," I said. There were probably other complaints. Maybe Mia finally decided her mortgage could survive a conscience. "You happy?" she asked. "Not yet," I said. "Revenge not satisfying enough." "Revenge isn't the point," I said slowly. "Helix paying a fine, or Victor losing a bonus, that doesn't help the nurse whose shift just got extended because the system crashed again. So what is the point?" she asked. "Building something that makes their existence less miserable," I said. "And making sure the people who made that misery profitable don't get to write the future." She smiled. "That sounds like revenge with extra steps." "I'm okay with extra steps," I said. Helix's stock dipped a few points on the news. Analysts wrote cautious notes. Then the market moved on. But inside Helix, the inquiry must have hit harder. We saw it in small ways. A hospital that had been on the verge of signing a major expansion with Helix paused their negotiations. Another client quietly asked if Ghostline could be installed in read-only mode alongside their Helix rollout. Just in case. Cracks, hairline, spreading. 14. The call. The call from Jenna came 9 months after I left Apex. I was in Northline's office, staring at a wall covered in printouts of Ghostline screens annotated with scribbles from nurses and doctors. We were planning the next release cycle. My phone buzzed. Her name appeared. I let it ring twice before I answered. "Cole, you always answer your phone like it's bad news," she said. "It often is," I replied. "What's up, Park?" Silence crackled for a moment. "How's freelancing?" she asked. "That what they're calling it?" I asked. "I prefer gainfully disillusioned. I've heard things," she said. "About Ghostline." "From who?" From clients who are supposed to be ours, she said. They say there's this new overlay tool that makes Helix's interface look like it was designed by kind children with crayons. I've always said your UI team had potential, I said. She ignored that. You're not violating your NDA. No code shared, I said. No proprietary designs, no client lists. Just the same data hospitals already own. Rearranged so humans don't have to suffer to see it. You know that's a very lawyered answer, she said. I live a lawyered life now. More silence. You heard about the SEC inquiry, she asked finally. I read the news, I said. Must be fun in those board meetings. It's a mess, she said, and some of the polished confidence I'd always associated with her voice cracked. Half of it is Apex's historical stuff. Half of it is Helix being Helix. You sound surprised, I said. I thought I could change things from the inside, she said. Push for ethical standards, better implementation practices. But every time I raise an issue, the answer is we'll fix it in the next quarter. That's one way to define infinity, I said. I didn't call to confess, she said. Why did you call? I asked. To warn you, she said. Helix Legal has started looking into Ghostline. They think you're using Atlas IP. They're talking about injunctive relief, lawsuits, making an example. My fingers tightened around the phone. Let them look, I said. There's nothing to find. They don't need to be right, she said. They just need to be loud and rich. They can bury you in court until you run out of money. We have insurance, I said. She laughed softly. You think they care about that? This isn't about winning. It's about exhausting you. I didn't respond. Ethan, she said quietly. I'm sorry. It was the first time she'd said that. For what? I asked. For going along with Victor, she said. For building Orion on top of your work and then letting them call you obsolete. For not walking when I should have. You had your reasons, I said. A career, a title, a path. Funny thing about paths, she said. Sometimes you don't realize you're walking off a cliff until you feel the air under your feet. She took a breath. Helix is scared, she continued. Not just because of the SEC. Because of you. Because you know how the system works. Because you're proving that it doesn't have to. Good, I said. I can't keep calling you, she said. They monitor everything. But I thought you deserved a heads up. I appreciate it, I said. Be careful, she said. They don't like losing control of the narrative. They already did, I said. They just haven't realized it yet. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet for a long moment. Then I opened my laptop and pulled up a folder labeled Clean Room. Inside were all the design docs, diagrams, and notes we'd created for Ghostline that had been reviewed by outside counsel. Every proof that we'd built from first principles, not stolen ones. Helix wanted to drag us into a legal fight. Fine, we'd bring receipts. Cartoon 15, The Hearing. It took another 4 months for the SEC's informal inquiry to become a formal investigation. By then, Helix's board had hired an outside firm to conduct an internal review. Their report, redacted, leaked, and dissected by the financial press, used phrases like material weakness and inadequate internal controls. Victor did not appear on CNBC anymore. Apex Meridian's name showed up in the footnotes of the 10K filing, stripped of branding, reduced to acquired entity. I didn't dance when I read it. I just felt the slope tilt a little further. The first time, North Line was mentioned in the same sentence as Helix in an article. It was almost an afterthought. Some hospital clients, wary of further consolidation in the healthcare IT space, have begun adopting third-party overlay solutions, like those provided by Northline Systems, to mitigate vendor risk. Mitigate vendor risk. I liked that phrasing. We weren't their saviors. We were their exit strategy. One afternoon, Priya walked into the office with a printout in her hand and dropped it on my desk. "Read this," she said. It was a letter from a hospital CFO we'd never met. "To whom it may concern, we are writing to express our preliminary interest in a strategic partnership with Northline Systems as a preferred overlay vendor across our network of hospitals." I looked up. "How many hospitals are in their network?" I asked. 42, she said. I leaned back in my chair. "This is it," she said. "This is the inflection point. It's also the point where Helix starts to see us as more than an annoyance," I said. "They already see you as more than an annoyance," she said. "You're the ghost in their machine." I thought about that. For years at Apex, I'd been the guy behind the curtain, making things work so people on stage could take bows. Now my best work was staying behind the curtain on purpose, not invisible, just uncentered. If Ghostline did its job right, most people would never know our name. They'd just know their shift felt less like drowning. 16. The fall. The fall didn't happen in one day. It happened in dozens of small compounding moments that only looked sudden in hindsight. A regional health system canceled a planned $80 million expansion with Helix, citing ongoing uncertainty regarding financial reporting. Another system renegotiated their contract, demanding steep discounts and the right to run third-party overlays without penalty. A prominent healthcare blog published a leaked internal memo from a Helix exec complaining that Northline's Ghostline product is eroding our stickiness at the point of care. The SEC investigation culminated in a settlement. No guilty plea, no dramatic confession. Just a fine large enough to make headlines and small enough to be a cost of doing business. Victor resigned to pursue other opportunities. Regina declared the matter a learning experience. Helix's stock took a hit, then stabilized. They would survive, but they would never fully own the narrative again. Inside the industry, a different conversation began, quietly, in hallways at conferences, in Slack channels between clinicians. Maybe, people started to think, we don't have to accept monoliths. Maybe we're allowed to demand tools that don't treat us like afterthoughts. Ghostline wasn't the only reason that conversation started, but we were there, on the edges, every time someone needed proof that alternatives existed. 17. The parking lot. A year and a half after my last day at Apex, I found myself back in that part of town. Northline had just signed a deal with a hospital a few blocks away, and I'd parked in the same garage I used to use when I worked for Victor. Old habits. On a whim, I turned into the lot behind the Apex building. The glass tower looked the same from a distance. Closer, it looked emptier, fewer cars. A patch of weeds in the corner of the lot that no one had bothered to pull. A now leasing sign on a banner in the adjacent structure. I stood by the fence, hands in my pockets, and watched employees trickle out. Most of the faces were unfamiliar. One wasn't. Mia walked out the side door, a bag slung over her shoulder, a phone pressed to her ear. She was laughing at something, eyebrows lifted. She saw me, stopped, and held up a finger to whoever was on the line. Then she hung up and walked over. "Jesus," she said. "You haunt this place now." "Just passing by," I said. "Old ghosts, old parking habits." She smirked. "How's it feel, seeing your ex from a safe distance?" "Less painful than I expected," I said. She gestured at the building. "They shut down 3 floors," she said. "Moved a bunch of teams remote. Everyone says it's strategic flexibility. We all know it's we grew too fast and cooked the books." "You still there?" I asked. "For now," she said. "But I'm talking to some people. Ghostline people." "Good people," I said. "I've heard," she said. "Some of our hospitals literally refused to renew unless Helix allowed them to keep their overlays." A few years ago, we would have laughed at that. Now it's in board slide decks. Times change, I said. People change, she corrected. Sometimes. She looked at me for a long moment. You did it, she said finally. Did what? I asked. You made them feel small, she said. I shook my head. They did that to themselves. I just helped other people see it. She smiled. This time it reached her eyes. Semantics, she said. You still good with gravity metaphors? Always, I said. I'm going to fall your way eventually, she said, just figuring out the angle. There's space, I said. We're not trying to build an empire, just a better nervous system. Less marketing, she said, more actual care. We stood in silence for a moment, watching a delivery truck back up to the loading dock. You regret any of it? She asked. I thought about the nights spent agonizing over whether reporting Apex to the SEC made me disloyal. About the fear of being sued into oblivion. About the weight of knowing that my decisions might cost people their jobs. Regret? I said. No. You're lying, she said gently. I regret that it had to get this bad before anything shifted, I said. That's not on me. But I still regret it. That's the compliance answer, she said. What's the human answer? I asked. She studied my face. You look less tired, she said. That's enough. She glanced at her watch. I have to go sit in a meeting where we pretend everything is fine, she said. But she pulled a small card from her bag and handed it to me. Mia Torres, Director, Internal Ethics and Compliance, and under it, in smaller print, open to discussing what comes next. The title's new, she said. The chaos is not. I'll call, I said. You better, she said, then turned and walked back toward the building. I watched her go. Then I turned and walked back to my car. 18. The question. People like to ask eventually, was it worth it? They mean the whistleblower form, the late-night calls, the risk, the years it took for anything to visibly crack. They think revenge is about a feeling, a moment when you stand over the ruins and think, yes. This balances the scale. That moment never comes. What comes instead are smaller, quieter things. A nurse sends feedback that says, for the first time in 15 years, I didn't go home with a headache from fighting the computer. A doctor tells you, I actually saw my patients' faces today, not just their charts. A hospital CFO admits over coffee. We were terrified of Helix, knowing there was another way. Changed how we negotiated. Revenge, I've learned, isn't about making them hurt. It's about making sure they can't keep hurting everyone else in the same way. The night Helix settled with the SEC, I sat on my couch, watching the scrolling news feed on mute. Stocks dipped, analysts pontificated. Lawyers smiled. None of that belonged to me. What belonged to me was an email that arrived an hour later, from a junior developer at Northline, one of our newest hires. Hey, Ethan, not sure if this is the right time to say this, but I burned out at my last job building features that ignored what users actually needed. This is the first place I've worked where assume the nurse is tired is an actual design principle, not a joke. Thanks for making that the rule, not the exception. Attached was a photo of a whiteboard in our own war room. In big letters at the top, someone had written, "Assume the nurse is tired." Underneath, in smaller letters, "And build like you're on her side." I stared at the photo for a long time. Then I closed my laptop and sat in the dark, listening to the hum of the city. They'd called me obsolete, a line in a slide deck, a decision made at 2:47 p.m. by people who thought the story began and ended with them. They were wrong. The story went on without them. 19. The answer. If you're waiting for the part where I say I forgave them, this isn't that story. Forgiveness is a luxury I haven't fully decided I can afford. What I can say is this. I stopped thinking about them as the center. Helix, Apex, Victor, Regina, the board, the investors. They're parts of the landscape. Big, loud, and occasionally dangerous. But they're not the point. The point is the exhausted nurse at 3:17 a.m., trying not to make a mistake because the interface was designed by someone who's never seen a code blue. The point is the patient who has no idea their life depends on a silent war between vendors. The point is the junior engineer who wants to do good work without being told to fix it next quarter. They're the ones I think about when I open my laptop now, not the people who put obsolete next to my name. They wrote me out of their story, so I wrote a different one, and in that story, their empire didn't explode in a single glorious blast. It dimmed, slowly, as more and more people realized they didn't have to orbit it anymore. They could choose a different gravity, they could choose to stand